Welcome to another edition of Drummer Nation Live. And I have a great show for you today. We have a great show. First of all, say hello to my inestimable colleague and co-host, Adam Nussbaum.
Hello, team.
And our special guest, who I'm known about forever, just meeting today, Mr. Chester Thompson. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm well, man. I'm well. I've been following your career forever, and it's easier to list the types of music you haven't recorded and toured with than the types you have. What an incredible career. Let's go through a little of that, okay?
Oh, sure.
And then eventually I'd just like it to be cats talking about drums and music.
Great.
Right. So you were a kid in Baltimore?
Yeah.
I've done a little research on you, and you grew up listening to Max and Art and Elvin and Tony and all those cats, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Playing a small kit, jazz music?
Yeah, that was the start of it, yeah.
Light touch?
Mostly.
Yeah. What was your early influences? How'd you get rolling on that in the first place?
Oh, man. Well, oh, goodness. So there was a friend of the family, best friend of one of my brothers, who my brother was home from the military on leave, and so his friend came by who I hadn't seen in a while, and he found out I had just started playing drums in the school band, and he made the mistake of saying, if you ever want to get a lesson, come by. So that summer I rang his bell every morning at 9 o'clock, and our lessons consisted of him showing me how to play along with albums by Miles and Max and everybody, and just showed me where to put the ride, and taught me a great piece of information. Said when you get lost in the solos, first learn the melody and keep singing the melody in your head so you'll know where they are when they're soloing, So I was at his house one day. He had chosen to play jazz. It was back in those days, it was soul music. And someone called him for that, which he wasn't interested in. He was about to hang up. He says, well, hold on. So he covers the mouthpiece on the phone and say, hey, you want a gig? Of course I want a gig. I'm 13 at that point. And so he said, I got a drummer for you. He's 13, but they wanted an audition. I didn't even have a kit yet. So he took his kit down to the club for me to audition. And then the family got together and got me a used drum kit because the gig started the following weekend, and that did that all through school. So Max was probably the first big influence, and Art, of course. Then I discovered Elvin and messed everything up. Yeah, I mean, well, Tony much later, I guess when I was in high school. But
So gigging at 13, that's pretty amazing, man.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah, it was like,
Chester, I gotta ask you a question.
uh-huh.
Baltimore has a history of some great musicians. I know, people that may all now know about Dennis Chambers.
Of
He's
course,
from
yeah.
there.
Hmm.
But I was fortunate enough to get to play with a wonderful pianist from Baltimore named Albert Daly.
Absolutely.
And
No,
there
yeah.
was also Gary Bartz. And then I'm thinking of other guys that I met from that scene.
Mhm.
Dave Hubbard, the tenor player,
Yeah,
and Harold White, the drummer.
yeah.
Now,
Oh,
did you know them when you were a kid?
abs well, Albert was gone when I left. By the time I came on the scene, he was gone. Gary was
Okay.
kind of on the way out. I didn't, still never met Gary, believe it or not. But his dad had a jazz club, had the one real jazz club in town, the North End Lounge, and I happened to play the very last gig that ever happened there. It was an organ trio I was with, and we've still yet to actually meet, But anyway, but yeah, most of those guys. Harold White gave me a couple of lessons, and man, that guy was unreal. I heard him in New York after he left Baltimore, and he was so laid back. I was shocked because he was probably the fastest, most dynamic drummer I'd ever heard. But he had to fit in when he got up there, so he had to tone it down.
Interesting. Who were some of the other, cats that were part of the scene that maybe we may not be aware of, people that may have had an effect on, your growth as a young musician and getting to play with?
Well, there was another drummer, Pernell Rice was his name. I never got to
Right.
Never got to hear him live. I did get to meet him, and he showed me a couple of things. I was like maybe 14 or something, when I met him, and
Hmm.
he was kind of regarded as the guy. Um, And there was a saxophone player named Mickey Fields, who people were always trying to get to leave town, and he just didn't. He just was sick of the road. He didn't want to go anywhere. But he played great saxophone, great trumpet, decent organ player. I mean, he was one of those. Any tune in any key, it didn't matter. He was that guy.
They're those cats, you know.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, they don't want to leave town, man. And after a while, with all the running around we do, it's nice that we can stay home.
Well, yeah. There's an organ player I played with a lot, a guy named Charles Covington,
I know
organ in
that name
Canada.
also.
Yeah, well, he was pretty phenomenal. He toured with Benson for a while, but he's one
Hmm.
of those guys, mostly self-taught. He actually taught himself classical organ. He used to go to Peabody Conservatory. He used to go down there and just ask him if he practice on the organ. They ended up putting him on the faculty once they heard him a few times. And he
Wow.
taught at Howard University for a lot of years, teaching there, teaching keyboard and jazz choir. Um,
Hmm.
Did you ever see the series Treme that was on HBO for a while about New
no.
Orleans? Well, there's a trumpet player there, Kermit Ruffins, and
Mhm.
they say to him, "Man, you want to just live in a Treme and cook in your backyard and walk to all the gigs in a quarter and do that your whole life?" And he says, "That'll work."
Yeah.
Great, great.
Now you've spent a lot of time on the road, and I know there was a time when, and we'll cover some of that, but I know there was a time when you decided to move to Nashville and kind of chill out all that stuff, right? Raise a family and be home.
Yeah, well, it's the weirdest thing. Every life just started pointing to Nashville. It's not something I'd ever thought about. Larry London was a dear friend,
Hmm.
and actually, it kind of started. I came here for his funeral. We had been really close, and so when he passed away, I knew his family, so I came down to the funeral. I got in a day ahead, and this is before GPS, so I had to go to the gas station, get the map, and draw out my route with a pen, so I wouldn't get lost the day of the funeral, and just drove around and fell in love with it because everything was green, and when it was a river, it had water in it, as opposed to LA.
Hmm.
And I just fell in love with the place. I went back home and said to my wife, "What do you think of Nashville?" She said, "I don't." But everything I got booked for a session, and everything started pointing here. If we needed something fixed in the house, the answer was in Nashville. It got crazy. So we decided to all come and take a look. And by then, she wasn't quite so adamant about never coming here. So we came here a week later. We bought a house and registered our son in school. Went back to LA and started packing.
And
Beautiful.
what
Crazy.
year was that?
That was in '93.
Okay.
I'd been in
Yeah.
LA for 20 years, and I've never done anything like that before or since. But we knew it was going to be home.
I remember the first time I saw the LA River, and it was a concrete hole. It
Exactly.
had no water in it until, of course, it
They had
flooded.
a lot. They had a lot of fish. There was a trout problem.
Oh man. Yeah, they were just all those things all over the city. They were just storm drains, and they all just
Yeah.
went
Right.
down and emptied into the ocean. And
Yeah, yeah.
there were times with a heavy storm, it would be filled to the brim. Man, it was crazy. Yeah.
Now my son lives in Nashville. He's a guitar player, so I get up there all the time. I've always thought that was a special city. Something beautiful
It's
about
pretty
it.
cool.
Yeah, yeah.
It's changed a lot. It's trying real hard to be a big city. I liked it better when it was a little smaller, but
Well, I was in LA in the 80s, and they used to I know you were too. They used to have bumper stickers that said, "Welcome to LA, now go home." Remember that?
oh yeah, my wife wanted one of those for here actually.
Yeah, everybody wants to be the last one in because it gets crazy
Right.
pretty quick.
Yeah,
So you
after
were
we've been
teaching.
here a few years, they say there were 100 people a day moving here.
Yeah, yeah.
For a few years.
Now you were teaching at one of the universities there for a long time, right?
Yeah, Belmont University. My son was going to school there, and the teacher who had been teaching him ended up leaving. He went to work on another degree or something, and we weren't crazy about what my son was getting because it was very mental. It was nothing about feel. It was just it was math. The guy was like,
Hmm.
he could have been
Hmm.
teaching math.
Hmm.
And so I knew the head of the commercial music department, and he asked if I'd be interested. And because I'd always wanted to teach my son everything I know, and that's kind of hard to do, kind of weird to do at home.
Yeah.
So you know, and he hates it to this day when he hears me say it, but for me, it worked out great because then I could teach him everything I wanted to. If he didn't pay attention, I could flunk him, and I was getting paid for it, you know?
I'm sure it worked out great. You also worked a little with my friends Roger and Lori over at the Nashville.
Oh my goodness, yeah, dear
Aren't they
friends, yeah,
wonderful people? Yeah.
man, they're wonderful.
I know him for many years because Lori grew up with Jeff Hamilton, who's my buddy.
Absolutely, yeah.
I
Yeah,
got to know him that
Jeff
way.
comes through quite a bit, actually. He plays there quite a lot, actually, at the Jazz Workshop, you know.
Yeah, I couldn't hear him the last time he was there. My son went to hear him though, and
Oh, okay.
so I presume you guys are pals. He speaks very highly of
Yeah.
you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
I
talk
go
about.
down and steal all the. Let's go steal all his licks when he comes to town, you
We all try to.
know.
Uh,
Right.
what was your first? Well, you have so kind of walk me through your career from when you started getting these calls and
Okay. Well, I started out playing some really, dive bars, of course. Your dues will
right.
be paid.
Mhm.
Over time, I started working, the nicer clubs and, meeting more and more players and stuff. And right out of high school, ended up going on the road doing cover tunes. We had a really good cover band doing soul music. It's the craziest thing because we didn't mostly end up doing white clubs in the South in the late '60s, so that was a little strange. But
Yeah.
but it was a really good band. Did that 5 years. I ended up with touring with Jack McDuff for a year
Mhm.
at the end of that. Then I ended up in Boston for about 6 months. There was a wonderful keyboard player named from Baltimore named Webster Lewis. He had a pretty killer group, wonderful organ player and arranger. So I did that for the last 6 months. And then I realized it was time to go home and go back to school. So I came back home 71, I guess 5 years after high school. I graduated 66. So you know, when it was a community college, but the cool thing about it, there's this, really sort of snooty conservatory called Peabody Conservatory there. And part of the faculty had left to go take over the music department in this community college. They wanted to, teach kids that didn't have those opportunities and finances. So I got they designed the program, so I got like a conservatory education for like $200 a semester, And so 2 years of that, I was planning on um, transferring to University of Maryland. The head of the department had taken me down to meet the head of the department down there. It was kind of paving the way for me to get into there. I
Mhm.
wasn't sure how much work I'd be able to do because I was going to go full time, and I didn't really know that many people in Washington. It's a lot closer to DC than it is Baltimore. So I decided to just take a semester off, work, save as much money as I could, in case I didn't get to go out and do a lot of gigs. And I did what some of the musicians in those days did. I went out and applied for a school bus driving job, and
Really?
learned how to drive this school bus, which I love driving anything. So that it was actually pretty fun. And then I was supposed to start on a Monday morning. They took me out Friday in the bus. Um, the guy said, "Turn here, turn there." It was a part of town I'd never been in my life. And I didn't really pay attention because kept saying, "Turn here, turn there." Then at the end, he says, "Well, this is your route. You're going to pick these kids up Monday morning." I'm terrified. I have no idea where I am, right?
Mhm.
So I get home that evening. I get a phone call from a friend from Baltimore who had become Zappa's tour manager. And he says, "How'd you like to play with Frank Zappa?" And I had heard some of the music. It's like, "Sure, I'd love to." He said, "Well, you got to do an audition. Only catch is you got to get on a plane Sunday, rehearsals Monday morning, and I've already bought your ticket." So school bus Monday Zappa audition.
Yeah. Well,
Needless to
you're
say,
going to drive a different bus. Let's put it that way.
exactly. Well, I was a co-driver because Ralph Humphrey was in the band.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh my goodness, man, what a player!
So then
And
now you have to audition for Zappa, who's known
well,
for
my
writing stuff.
audition, well, the way it came down to me, Frank had mentioned, to the manager and tour manager, my friend, he says he felt like the band had gotten too perfect. He felt like it was starting to feel a little sterile.
Mm.
So he was thinking of adding a second drummer, somebody with more of a street feel, is how he put it. And my guy said, "Well, I got the guy for you." And my audition consisted of we just jammed for about an hour straight. Just style. We just went from style to style to style. It was George Duke and Tom Fowler on bass. It was just the three of us just going at it, you know. And at the end of it, he liked my playing, so we started rehearsing that day. I had 2 days of rehearsal, just the rhythm section, and then the third day he had the rest of the band come in, which is Ruth Underwood and Ralph Humphrey and Bruce Fowler, and I was terrified. I mean, they started going through that stuff, man. It was like, oh my goodness, what did I just get myself into, you know?
Now you're reading that stuff, right?
Well, yeah, Ralph Humphrey saved my butt. He had just finished his book called Evening the Odds because, you know, I'd be going, I'm playing and going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, you know. He says, hey man, there's only two time signatures, 2 and 3. You just do multiples. It's like if there's too many twos, count 4. That saved me. Okay, so and then I was able to feel like how to make it groove as well. So yeah,
2 and
so
3.
Question, quick question.
Go ahead, Adam.
yeah,
Chester, did he have specifically drum parts for you?
absolutely, yes, yes,
And
very much so.
so everything like was specified, you know, dotting the I's, crossing the T's.
Yeah, and then sometimes you could do. Sometimes he heard the fill and wrote it, but for the most part, we played our own fills.
Okay.
And there was always he was really big on solo sections, and so in those sections, you just go for it. You know,
Right.
those were
Were
free.
they lead sheets as such or specific
No, no,
drum
no, no, no.
parts?
These were seriously detailed charts.
Okay.
Really
Okay.
detailed. Yeah.
Because, you know, you always hear those stories about like the black page and things like that, you know.
Well, I was there before that came into existence. So
Right, right.
Let's
So
pick up on the
he
two.
wanted to combine
Right.
these things. And I think it was great what Ralph said to you, you know, you try to break down the complicated to its simplest components.
right, exactly. And
And then,
yeah, we felt things very differently. So we had to have like plenty of bass drum in each other's monitors, and we had to watch each other like a hawk, you know. But it worked. It
because you
really,
didn't want to
really
duplicate things, right?
sometimes.
Right,
Some no Frank. I mean, so Frank's biggest influence was Stravinsky and
right,
Edgar Perez. So he was big into counterpoint and all this other kind of stuff, which he blended it with rock and roll. I don't
Right.
know how much of his stuff, his instrumental stuff you've heard, but man, the guy was pretty deep. And
Huh.
the crazy thing was he could never play his guitar parts when he first wrote a song because he didn't write from the guitar. He did not need an instrument to write. He just literally heard it, all the notes in right order in his head and just sat there and wrote them down. I've
wow.
watched him do it on a plane a couple of times on the way to a sound check.
Now, were you expected to sight read that stuff or to shed it?
No, Frank was the best teacher I've ever had. What I learned, if nothing else, I learned how to rehearse and how to tweak, how to really get a band tight. Um, like the really crazy sections, I don't know if you've got any of One Size Fits All in there, but Inca Roads is one of my favorite things I've ever done. It's got some crazy parts in it. And so what would happen is if it was like a really crazy part, he would take it down to tempo di lerno, you know.
Right.
Uh, so we had this one thing that goes like and then like I'm doubling on the tom, Ruth Thunder was doing mallets. But we would start it dot 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 and then a little faster. It might take an hour in some cases, but by the time he got it where he wanted it, I was amazed. I'd never been a part of anything that tight in my life. It was pretty crazy.
What would you like to hear from that One Size Fits All?
Oh, well, Inca Rose would be good.
Let's try
Pretty,
that.
pretty crazy tune.
Do you
I
think
mean,
I like that term you used, tempo di lerno.
yeah,
I always say that too.
exactly.
let's bring this up for a second.
Could our vehicle come from somewhere out there? Just to land in the Andes. Was it round and did it have a Ball, I don't know. That white can't do nothing. Very enjoyable.
I don't want to play too much of it because I'll
But
bust
if
me.
you go a little further into the tune, it gets really crazy. All written. Everything was written.
Well, just reading the melody for the vocalist is
Well, that was George Duke, so yeah.
okay. Well, he could do it, yeah, but that's not easy either. I mean, that's really
Mhm.
difficult
Incredible.
music.
It's incredible to hear, the balance of, intricate and, complicated and humorous at the
Oh
same
yeah.
time.
Well, that
It's
was
in a
his thing.
way,
Yeah.
when I hear Zappa, sometimes it reminds me sometimes of like a modern version of Spike Jones sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. He was a
And
big Spike Jones fan. Yeah.
You
it's
can hear
it's
that.
incredible the way he brings all these elements together, and it's got everything. There's still some nasty in there, and it's
Mhm.
you know he was a one in a row, as I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like I said,
Wow.
that was like an amazing school to go to. It's so funny because sometimes we get off tour, man. I'm just like, man, can somebody please just play a blues? Can I just go somewhere?
Can we just do a 12/8,
Yeah.
12 bar blues? Yeah, that's great
Where's the
stuff, though.
stripper? Yeah.
Look at the movie Roxy and Elsewhere. You'll see it.
So
You'll see it.
how long were you on Frank's band?
Huh?
How long
Only
were you on Frank's
not
band?
quite 2 years. Only reason I left, he canceled a tour, and he was very honest about it. He had gotten the film editing machine, and he needed time to learn how to use it because he was a real hands-on guy.
Right.
And unfortunately, we were on the road so much, I didn't really know anybody in LA yet. So as it turns out, Alfonso Johnson and I had been friends since like '69. He was 18, I think I was 20 when we first started playing together. He's from Philly and I'm from Baltimore, and we just ended up, playing together a lot. And he was saying to me, "Hey man, the guy's a weather reporter in town. Why don't you come on down and jam with the guys?" And as the conversation went on, he says, "Man, we went through so many drummers last year." I said, "Well, man, I don't really want to have to audition." "Oh no, it's not an audition. Just show up. Just come down." And of course, I get there. There's another kid there and another guy.
It's an
And
audition.
the other drummer was phenomenal. A guy named Woody Theus, called himself Sunship. This guy,
Right.
oh my goodness, he could play, man. And I had no expectations to get the gig. They would have each of us get up and play. And I guess those styles weren't that different. He had played a lot of outside stuff as well. And so in the middle of, at one point, it was his turn to play, and they did like everything was improvised. They didn't call any tunes. They would just start playing. And so they did like a weather report, very weather reportish ballad kind of thing. So very ethereal, lots of space. And this guy was like a monster energy wise, and he froze. He had no idea what to do, which we were all stunned. We were actually shocked. So then it was my turn to play, and the band I'd mentioned I'd been in Boston, that particular band, they were sick of playing all the whole book of arrangements that they had, and so the first person on stage, whatever you happened to do, became the first tune. So they were just each night, just okay, you go up first, and whatever doodling you did became the first tune. So you could never repeat a set, but it went like man, it went in directions you could never plan. So having done that for a while, and grew up playing a lot of straight ahead jazz, it wasn't really intimidating. That was kind of I guess kind of at home with that. So I ended up going out with them just because I had no other work. But once I played that music, there was no going back either.
This is Weather Report.
Yes, yes.
Now, a lot of like Jocko, I mean, Alphonse Stoge, they went through a lot of drummers,
Hmm.
a lot. Um, how was it working with Zawinul?
Great. Yeah, Zavano could intimidate people.
That's what I was getting at.
Well, but if you really check him out, a lot of times he would say something outrageous, and if you really look at him, there'd be a little twinkle in his eye. and you could he's just putting you on. He's testing you. You just and I mean, I grew up with some characters, so it was
You
um,
were prepared.
pretty much, yeah,
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 because you had the balance of, you were coming out of what you'd done when you were younger,
mm,
and, also having come from the Frank experience,
right,
you
right,
you brought a great balance of elements, which
hmm
was what was something that worked for him. Because, Joe used to play with Dinah Washington and Maynard Ferguson and
exactly, yeah,
Cannonball,
right, right,
as well as having grown up in Vienna, that whole
absolutely,
combination of
absolutely.
elements. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, we got on pretty well. Like I say, and the thing is, I wasn't there. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I mean, if they gave me some direction, I'd try to follow it. And I mean, the crazy thing is, so like one of the first tunes we go over, and I knew all the tunes because they were my favorite band, so I pretty much knew all the recordings by then.
Mhm.
Prepared.
Right, so I had to not act like a fanboy though. So so I remember one of Wayne's tunes we did, I think it was a Scarlet Woman or something, but he says to me, okay, on this tune, picture a caravan going across the desert. That was it.
That sounds
That
Wayne-ish.
was Wayne's direction, right?
Yes, yes. But both of those guys were way big movie fanatics. I mean, they loved the old actors in movies and stuff, boxers and actors. Those were their favorite things, and Brazilian music. And so they would both usually, if they would give me a visual cue of where they wanted it to go, which suited me just fine. I mean, I felt like it freed me up actually.
Did you ever have any charts to read with Weather Report?
Not until we recorded Black Market. And they were really difficult charts. I was shocked,
Hmm.
because, only in the sense that the rhythms are not what everybody else writes, and they almost never write anything in a group of four. If you really check out the tunes, they're almost groups of three or five. Very
Inside
rare.
inside of
Even
4/4,
even Birdland, it's not in groups of four. The
right?
section stuff.
But it's inside of 4/4, but it's grouped oddly, right? Is that what
Yeah, I mean,
you?
and right, and there, some of the melodies are pretty. So I would basically have a lead sheet. They didn't write like a drum chart. And
Mhm.
my favorite Weather Report melody of all times, we were rehearsing for Black Market. We went in this rehearsal room, and for some reason, somebody forgot to order music stands. So we've all got our charts spread out on the floor. I've got, behind the drums, the whole deal. And Wayne gets this look in his eye. He says, I know, let's run over the music. And we did. We literally ran over the music with Wayne in front.
What do you mean ran over? You just read it, you mean?
No, he laid it on the floor and we ran over the music. We literally ran over the music.
I thought that's what you meant, but that can't be real.
Wow.
That's interesting.
I guess I
Nothing
didn't know if that was
surprises me when
I
I
didn't know if
hear
that was a
about
tradition he
Wayne.
did or what, but. But yeah, Wayne just
Wow.
got this look in his eye. I mean, the guy had quite the sense of humor, actually. I mean, you had to
Oh
pay
yeah.
attention because he sort of talked like he played you like a real first spoke that. But then he said this and that. But then, yeah, I mean, it's like it was that rhythm he played with.
Sometimes when I hear Wayne, it's almost like he's declaring questions more
Hmm.
than answers.
Wow, that could be.
It's an interesting way
And
to look at it.
and he had his brother Alan Shorter.
I didn't know that.
He was an older brother of Wayne, and
Huh.
he's on the record, The All Seeing Eye, on one tune. And he recorded several records for Verve that were very, very free with early Gato Barbieri.
Oh,
And one of the records he did was entitled Orgasm, that came out on Verve in the mid late 60s.
wow.
And there was an expression, because Wayne was from Newark, to
Right.
be as weird as Wayne.
Ah,
And the thing is that, Wayne at least had a foot on the inside of
mhm.
reality, and Alan always had issues.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
but it was fascinating, because I used to see Alan quite a bit. He would come down to the Gil Evans gig when I was doing it. He would show up and he would just be looking and lurking, and it was fascinating. But I don't want to get off on a track. But it explains things, and how I
Okay.
think if you saw that big documentary about Wayne,
That was
there
great.
is some
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
is some reference to Alan. Yeah,
Okay.
He's kind
Okay.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
cryptic and mystical, as I think of
yeah.
Wayne Shorter. Now, are you
Oh
on
man.
You're on Black Market, right?
Yes.
What would you like to hear from that?
Oh goodness. Okay, quick disclaimer. They gave Nard or Michael Walden the credit on the song Black Market, which is not accurate.
You're
He's
on
on
it.
he's on the second half of the track.
Of
It's
that one track?
it's
Wow.
2 different days of recording. I played a straight eight fill and then they tried a swing fill with him. Uh, they had hired Jocko and I was home for Christmas. I didn't know anything I didn't know Alfonso had left the band. So
Hmm.
when I get back, they assumed I had quit, and turns out when they found out, well, I didn't quit. So then it was kind of a weird thing going on because they had asked Jocko, who do you want to play with, and he had said Nard or Michael Walden, and so uh, so they tried Black Market with a swing field and ended up keeping the first half that I did. Then in the middle, you hear where the reverbs change, the drum sounds, everything changes, and it's a different day of recording.
Oh, I didn't know that. What, can we hear
Yeah,
some of
Quick
that, though?
question.
Go ahead.
I want to go back to something you said before. What was your favorite tune? You didn't mention the title of the Weather Report tunes,
On Black Market, I
Chester.
was asking.
Yeah.
Oh, on Black Market. Oh, goodness.
It could be
Ooh.
anything, though. I can probably pull it up.
Well, I think I liked,
One of the melodies you said that you loved so much.
well, my very favorite one is not on, I didn't record it, was actually on Heavy Weather, which is a remark you made. I think this is just one of the most beautiful tunes ever written.
Isn't it, though? Yeah.
But I mean, there was one Gibraltar, which was kind of a favorite on the Black Market album.
I have
And
that in front of me. Look, let's play a little of that.
okay.
Wow. What's
That's Alfonso on bass, by the way.
it sounds Jocko-ish, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, Alfonso loved playing fretless as well, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was hearing. How big a kit were you playing on that?
2 bass drums, 9 toms, snare, a bunch of cymbals.
So that was a move. I mean, you came up playing like you imagine a bebop kit, right?
Well, okay, so when I was with Zappa, because Frank was a drummer first before he ever touched guitar. His first instrument was drums, as it turns
I didn't
out.
know that.
Whoa.
I didn't know
Oh
that.
yeah,
That explains
oh
a
yeah,
lot.
exactly. So Ralph and I come into rehearsal one day, and our two little five-piece kits are off the stage. So we have these two Ludwig Octoplus 12-piece kits that we're both supposed to play because Frank wanted to write for all those toms and all that stuff.
Right, I see.
And so when I left the band, I actually bought that kit from him and kept it with me. And I just, man, it's notes. I love having a lot of notes, because I like to think melodically. I have dreams of being a horn player, basically. So, I love having my little high pitch and my cannons and everything in between. I mean, it's intimidating at first because you think, oh, no, I got to play all of this stuff. Well, no, you don't. Piano players don't play every note. And I just found that I really love the variety of sounds. And so I stayed with that for several years, all through the Genesis period as well.
That's a good way to look at it. I mean, piano players ostensibly have 88 instruments there, right? But they don't play them all at
Exactly.
once.
Yeah. Yeah,
Ah,
it's there when you need it. It's there when you want it.
and you stuck with that. You still play a large kid, right?
These days, well, if I don't have to carry it, yeah. But otherwise, my go-to kit at home in the studio is three up and two down.
Okay.
Three racks and two floors.
And how many cymbals?
Sometimes just three, two crashes a ride. Depends on what I'm doing. If it calls for more, then I'm with Genesis, I have as many as six sometimes, but
Mhm.
mostly five. But in a China usually within that stuff. But
Let me drill in on cymbals for a second because I'm a cymbal guy. You were designing some stuff for Sabian, right?
yeah, I've got a couple of signature rides. Yeah,
And what are you looking for in your ride?
very dry, but I didn't want it too dark. It's funny because here in Nashville, I do more straight ahead jazz than anything here in town. And so I got to talk to them guys. I've got a wonderful ride that I had a jazz trio I toured Europe with, and they supplied a ride cymbal with me for me over there. That was wonderful, and I fell in love with it. So I, found it here. But mine is called the Liquid Ride, was the first one I did. Well, the first one was called Precision Ride, which was very dry, big bell.
I
The
remember
next one
those.
was
Yeah.
called Liquid Ride, which is much smoother, records incredibly well. And but it's not a dark, traditional jazz kind of sound. So I want to talk to them because at Sabian, they know how to do that stuff. I mean,
Absolutely.
I would go up there and spend a couple of days describing what I wanted, and the guy would just keep tweaking it till he got what I was looking for.
That's Mark Love, right?
It's amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's another guy that does it now, but yeah,
Right.
right. And
Right. It's
but
amazing to me when you're designing a cymbal and you're talking to the guy with a hammer in his hand, you know,
yeah.
what to do with it. And there's a communication that has to happen there about music and
Right.
banging on metal, to
Well, yeah, well, I did ask questions about what are the elements of getting to the sounds that made it easier for us to communicate because it's a combination. You got the alloy, but the biggie is the weight.
yeah.
Pitch is almost determined by the weight, so that, we were able to kind of really, by the second day we had nailed it.
The other
And the
interesting thing when
shape
you
and all that stuff has to do with, the shape, the profile.
Absolutely. All
yeah,
of that.
Yeah,
All of the above,
it's
yeah.
incredible how a piece of metal, on one hand, it's so simple and so
Mhm.
Right.
complex at the same
Right.
time.
we've
Yeah,
all
so
been through the process.
when I would first describe it, they would go to something that exists and ask, is this in the ballpark? And
Right.
and then we
Start
go from there.
starting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing is with especially if you're hand making it, it's not going to sound the same a week later.
Well,
You're hearing what you think you want, and you have to come back to it and make sure that's what you got.
the interesting thing is I ended up leaving with about three prototypes of the first one, and they sounded very similar, but they all had very different hammering things and stuff, the makeup. So they finally, because the other thing I don't want it to do is wash. I don't ever want to lose the stick sound. So I don't
Right.
want it to build up a wash, not for my ride.
Mhm.
And so it's got to be fairly dry. And what they ended up doing, the one that went into production, it was a hand hammered, but then they would do two machine passes around the outside edge and flange it up, which stopped the ringing. They would flange it up on the end with two machine. You could see the two machine passes, and so you got the attack. It's not totally dry. It rings, but it does not ring very long at all. It never builds up a wash.
And is it lathed or unlathed? The
Um,
rings in it from spinning it
yeah,
on.
yeah, it
Yeah,
is. It is hand hammered, but it is lathed. Yes,
that gives you some warmth too with that.
yes,
And this is the liquid ride.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, now
Fascinating.
there's so many elements of your career to look at. I
I've been pretty blessed, man.
well, you've earned it as well, and at some point, electronics came into the picture,
Yeah,
right? When
I'm
was that?
I'm a tech head, you know.
Yeah, I know you are. So you embraced the electronic thing
Yeah.
when many people fought it.
Mhm.
Was
Well,
that early Simmons stuff, or what were you? What was
oh man,
your
it
journey
just
into electronics? To give us a
yeah.
little brief
I
synopsis.
even had the first syndromes, which didn't last long. But
Right.
when the Simmons came out, that sort of changed the game a lot. You could really program them, and you know that was pretty big. At one point, I did a tour for Simmons. They came up with this one that you totally did it by a computer.
Right.
And I really learned how to program that thing very well. So I ended up doing clinic tours for them. Not many drummers were going to buy it because it was 10 grand. I mean, what drummer's going to buy
Right.
a 10 grand, drum
Right.
computer, you know?
Well,
So,
well, nowadays you can buy like a $400 software program
oh,
from
exactly. Right.
BFD or Superior Drummer or something, and go MIDI into that, and you can change it to an infinite degree. I mean, it's pretty
Right.
amazing.
Oh,
So, were
yeah.
you hurting your hands or anything with the Simmons, or did you play real soft, or because
I didn't
those?
play the first version. No, I refused to play the first ones. Phil played those, but he would have his monitor so loud that if he touched it with more than just the slightest tap, it would take his head off.
Because
So it
people
kept
don't know that's like a four mic a top that people were hurting their
Exactly.
hands.
So no, he would have
That's
it so loud in his monitor that he just the slightest little tap would that thing would be like in your face. So he
Mhm.
never ever hit it hard, you know.
Well, along with the electronics came sequencers,
Yeah.
and we had clicks prior to that, but then all of a sudden, I mean, you didn't have a click with Weather Report or with Zappa,
No,
right?
no, no.
Uh, it was more like a blowing band, what a jazz player would call blowing, right? But
Right.
now you have to be that. Was there a period in your life where that came up, where all of a sudden it's sequencers and clicks,
Well,
and
yeah,
then
but
you just adapt to that?
when I was younger, I practiced to a metronome a lot. As a matter of fact, I was so taken with Elvin that I was trying to figure out how can I learn that, get that kind of time, that free floating kind of time. So I devised a way to practice. I would set up my little practice kit with the pads, and once I'm hitting them, you can't really hear. So I actually found a metronome that had a light that would blink in time. So
Mhm.
I would practice playing is exactly in time, then gradually see how far I could move away from it while knowing where the time was. So I used to practice that way a lot, and it came in very helpful over the years, actually, having done that.
That's interesting because there are times when songs want to feel like they're pushing or they're
Oh, absolutely.
settling back, but you're not going to ever get
But
away
that's real
from
music,
click. It's
right?
what's that? I'm sorry.
That's real music.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the more we
I
get
mean,
away from that,
yeah,
go ahead.
I always think it's like, well, you're sitting in the chair. You can be sitting in the middle of the chair. You can be sitting
Hmm.
on the back of the chair. You can be sitting in the front of the chair, and you're
Absolutely.
still in the chair. And then
Mhm.
it's also going to have a major variance as far as, who you're playing with. It's like I try to be firm but flexible.
Right, right.
You have to have that latitude depending on who you're playing with and what's going on, because I was curious when you started to be involved with Phil and Genesis and that whole scene, how much of it was with sequences or
We
clicks or
we
anything
played live.
Yeah.
We played.
live. Amen.
The only things that ended up getting sequenced, there was like what's it called, invisible touch or something. There was like a synthesized bass line, and
Right.
that would run, but he still played it live along with that. Now Phil fell in love with these 808 drum machines, so I had to
Right.
play along with that thing a lot. The big hit in the air tonight, that starts with that 808 machine.
Right.
So, and this is before in-ear monitors, so I had these wonderful 3 foot monitors. I always wanted a stereo mix on stage, and unfortunately, they'd have to be louder than my drums, and I'm playing like a maniac, breaking cymbals and stuff. And so this ear is gone. I mean, I got no highs left on this side, but so I got a hearing aid for the one ear, which I'm not wearing at the moment. But if I got to mix something, I got to put it in. And but yeah, so once it got to in-ear monitors, that made life so much easier. And when I record, I always wear in-ears instead of headphones because the illusion is that it's in your head, like you're in the middle of the room as opposed to something sitting outside your head. And the click, you need just a tiny bit of click because it's right there. You just don't need the click banging away.
I've heard
I
people.
mean, our ears, that's the part of us that get the most use.
I've heard
Absolutely.
people equate time to pitch. Like in an orchestra, they're
Mhm.
agreeing on a pitch, right? That it's centered around, and that's the guiding thing for the whole orchestra, and that's negotiable,
Mhm.
sort of. And time would
Yeah.
be the same way, I presume.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I lived in LA, especially coming off the Zappa gig and after Weather Report, I somehow ended up getting called several times before clicks became widely used. I ended up several sessions I'd be called to repair a drummer that didn't really lock with the rhythm section. So there's no click, so I'm having to listen and negotiate and try to glue it together. And somehow I was able to do that. I did quite a few sessions that way. It's pretty terrifying almost, but somehow I learned pretty early on. Uh, my wife would disagree, but I learned how to listen. you know. And it finally dawned on me. It's like because I used to really focus on the bass player. I mean, I grew up, like I say, the soul music, the heavy bass stuff. And when I started to record, I would be doing that, and then I'd hear something in the guitar or the keyboard. It's like, man, I should have been acknowledging that. I should have been paying attention to that. And so I had to learn, to really pay attention. And I mean, these days I never listen to me. I try to listen to the sound of the band, and I try to hear the drums within the band. Just like if I was going to hear a band somewhere, I'm not very rarely am I paying attention to the drummer. And I mean, if it's somebody amazing, then yeah, of course you get drawn to it. But I try to really always hear the whole band. So even when I'm recording or playing live, I try to hear the whole band. And that way, if I'm hearing the whole band, I'll know if the drums are working or not.
Then you're in the music, in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's why you've been working so many years.
Might have something to do with it, right?
Oh
Um,
man.
let's talk about your new projects. You're continuing to record and release things. You have your
Okay.
what's going on with that?
Okay. We did it during COVID. Every song started with a raw drum track that I sent to the guys that were my very first band in LA. And they wrote around the drum tracks I sent.
Really?
Yeah, I sent them two melodies that they developed. It's a couple, the bass player and keyboard player, Pee Wee and Michiko. They're wonderful. Oh my goodness. And I called up at the start of COVID, what are you guys doing? And they got, they rent out a home studio when nobody's booking studio. They tour with their daughter. All the tours are canceled. We're just sitting around jamming with the drum machine. I said, well, no, don't do that. Let me send you something to jam with. So I
Hmm.
laid down about 5 minutes just for them, something to mess around with. They sent me back a track that they wrote around it that freaked me out, which it's actually track 3 on the album. But yeah, every track was done that way. Like I say, it started with me singing them a drum track, and then they wrote around it.
But it
And
was born of COVID, right?
huh?
It was
Yeah,
born of COVID.
it was all done during COVID. Yeah, it took just over a year to finish everything because their daughter started touring again, and so they weren't always available, and they were working on an album of theirs as well. And so then we added guitars as needed. My son's playing guitar on three of the tracks, and yeah, we got a couple of horn players. Jeff Coffin here in town
Oh
played
yeah.
some horns on the horns on
Or
that very first one.
are you touring again, or back to that, or are you staying home mostly?
Most staying home mostly. I went out a little bit last summer. An Australian prog rock band. Ended up doing a European tour that I ended up doing part of the album with them, and ended up doing the tour with them. And yeah, mostly I do a lot of tracks out of my house. I send drum tracks out of here. That's probably most of my work, and I get a fair amount of sessions here in town. I don't get called for much of the country stuff, but that's okay.
That's
Um,
okay. Well, you're still killing it, man. What an amazing career. Is there anything else you want to cover we haven't talked about?
I mean, I'm blown away by some of the drummers. It's so funny. I'm not huge with the whole gospel chops thing. I'm guessing you've seen some of that stuff.
Oh yeah.
That could become an Olympic event. Some of the stuff I've seen those guys do.
Roy Burns was a dear friend of mine. He used to call it Olympic drumming.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I mean, well, they entertain each other, they compete and that kind of thing. They don't, not many of them gig. There are those that know how to tone it down and they work, but for the most part, it's not, doesn't fit a band very well, unless they start writing stuff for it.
Right.
But again, I really respect what they can do. It's pretty incredible. I see guys all the time that make me want to go practice. I mean, like Dennis, for example. Dennis is a dear friend. We didn't know each other in Baltimore. I'm 10 years old. I was gone when he was coming up.
Mhm.
And so he had to hear about me. But when he hit the scene, every phone call from there was telling me about Dennis. So it was like, but then, like I say, when I first met him, he was playing with P-Funk of all things. But it was like just four on the floor all night. But he made it so tasty and creative. It was, man, who is this guy? And
All
but
boils down to music in the end, doesn't it?
oh goodness, I mean, he plays any and everything, and the guy doesn't read, right? So he can listen to almost anything. I don't care how many time signatures. He can listen twice and play the whole tune. It's pretty crazy.
I saw him do that on a video where these kids played some stuff he'd never heard before. It wasn't his
Right,
genre,
exactly.
and he just killed it.
Right,
He just killed it, man. He just listened
right.
for a minute.
Well, he started touring. His mom was a singer, so he started touring. Doing the club thing with her when he was 3.
Oh, okay.
She would take him
That
out to
explains it.
Oh
That
yeah, he
explains
was
it.
3 years old and he would be going out playing gigs with his mom.
The one
Right.
last thing I want to
Yeah.
touch on with you is technology and gear. You're all over that, right?
Yeah, I'm not doing as much of the electronics these days. I sequence a lot. Yeah, I do. I mean, I know my way around the computer and sequencing and stuff. I'm not a good keyboard player. I play. I mean, I understand theory pretty well, and I can write from the keyboard. I just can't play it in real time. My only other instrument was flute, actually, just because I love melodies. And
Well, I was really talking about more like video gear, cameras,
oh well,
editing,
yes,
audio stuff, microphones,
yeah,
all that stuff. You've
I'm
embraced
fairly, not
sincerely.
as much on the video. I did have to finally get Final Touch Pro
Yeah.
because people want videos with stuff, and I've had to learn how to. I give myself a good lead time to get behind the drums with the camera running, so I've
Right.
had to learn to go back and sync it up in Final Touch Pro, and I, give myself a, thing to link to line it up with, and I'm learning to do that fairly well. I mean, I don't think I could edit a movie or anything, but as far as getting stuff presentable to go out the door, I've had to learn how to do that. Yeah.
So, are you teaching still?
Haven't taught in a while. I'll mention this one thing. I've not mentioned it too much in the past because I didn't want it to get weird. But I okay, listen to all you young guys, especially us older young guys. Never ever stop exercising. I got lazy, got sedentary for a couple of years, and I'd go out and play my heart out. Ended up with something called tendinosis on my right, the tendons off my right hip. I had to learn how to walk again. I ended up in a rehab hospital with a walker, and they had to teach me
Really?
how to do that. I mean, it was deep. I'm like about a year and a half out now from that. I've had solid therapy for a year. It's a good solid year of physical therapy. One of the physical therapists was a drummer, so that helped a lot. He was able
And
to really tweak it.
what brought that on?
like I said, I got sedentary. I mean, all my life I played tennis. My go-to was always rollerblades. I
Mhm.
started skating as a kid. We skated in the streets, and I never stopped skating. You know, even growing up, I made sure my sons knew how to skate. I, you know, take them to the rink, make sure they got lessons, and but I always would skate. I always loved skating, and I wasn't even doing that. You know, tennis. I love tennis, and you know, see, I'm not certainly not an athlete, but you know, I always love to be active. You know, power walking, running, not a huge runner, but and then for a couple of years, I didn't even realize it had happened. I just stopped doing anything except going to play.
Was
And
that
I
during COVID?
huh?
Was that during COVID?
No, but that's probably where it started.
That's
But
what
no,
got me. I
well,
realized I didn't have pants on for two years.
oh yeah, there's that, right?
I
But I
didn't
mean,
put a
Don't
belt
tell
on for
anyone.
2 years.
the other thing is I've had three back surgeries. You know, uh-oh. I've had three back surgeries over the years. You know, L4, L5 is the biggie. And I was
Mhm.
asking my surgeon, I was like, man, what is it? Is it what I do? He says, no, it's like if you're a vertical human being, L4, L5 takes all the brunt of it, you know? He says, just realize that you standing still is the same amount of pressure as a Mack truck parked on the street. You know, the
Mhm.
amount of pressure on that disc, you know? And
You know what you're saying is so true. I hear it like a mantra every day. I was so fortunate to play for years with the tenor player James Moody, and he
mm,
used to walk every day like 4 to 5
yeah,
miles. And I
wow,
hear him say it. He used to say it. You want to keep moving, you better keep moving.
exactly. And
And
I learned the hard way.
You're a
and
swimmer, right, Adam?
well, I try to go every other day. I swim 1,000 strokes. I do
Ah,
that every other day, and I just try to keep. I'm just trying to keep loose, and I already dealt with the L4 L5 scenario.
mhm,
That was done about 8 years ago,
right,
and I think a lot of it also, many drummers I know have had the exact same surgery.
right,
And
right,
what do? We're sitting on the gig, we're sitting on planes, we're
right,
sitting, and we're also exerting the upper body. So, I
right.
mean, the whole thing I'm trying to think about is, pay attention,
Hmm.
but stay relaxed.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
that yin yang thing, because I want to be like, I want to be like water. You know what I mean? And I
Mhm.
just want to keep it flowing and keep things smooth. And as we get older, we have to do more. I mean,
Right.
I haven't had the back issue, but I had carpal tunnel on each wrist. I brought
Oh
my
man,
sticks to the doc. I said, "What are you? Am I doing anything wrong?" He said, "No, you've been playing drums for 50 years."
right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
all of us who are
Uh,
over 60
Lately,
have to.
I've had to have a couple of shots for trigger fingers.
Yeah.
So far, the shots are fine. You know, it's you know, when you do your fingers, then you hear them pop. You know, but yeah, that seems to take care of it. And yeah, it's kind of like I love the saying I keep hearing. It's like you don't quit playing because you're old. You get old because you quit playing. You know.
I was just going to say, there's also something about drumming that keeps you very young.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
that's what I've
I
told
want to
everybody
die
about it.
young, as old as possible.
Ah, there you go. I like that.
All
I
right,
like
man.
that.
I think, Jess, you've been very generous with your time, and I sure appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks for your wisdom, man.
Oh
Thank
man,
you.
great talking to you guys, man. And man, what a pleasure. Hopefully, we'll end up in the same city at some point and get together and hang a little bit.
Well, I'm in Nashville all the time because my son lives up there. So I owe
Ah,
you
yeah,
a
you were
beer
at the
or
drum
coffee
thing.
or a lunch or a dinner or something. I'm sorry, what?
You were at the Music City Drum Show, huh?
Yes, I was there, but I didn't see you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know I missed you somehow.
I know
Yeah,
you were there, and I was interviewing mostly all the story of those shows to me are the young companies that are vying for a toehold in the marketplace
yes,
with
yes.
whatever they're doing, and there's cymbals companies and sticks and drums and everything in the world. So I
Right.
interviewed like 20 of those cats. I didn't really
Okay.
focus on the artists, but I'm going to come and I owe you a lunch, a dinner, a beer, a hang, a coffee, something. We'll get together. Okay,
That would be awesome. That'd be great.
be my honor.
All right, you guys take
All
care.
right, gentlemen. Thank you so much. We'll see
Chester,
you next
thank you,
time.
man. Stay well, brother.
All right, you too, man. Take care.
Okay. Ciao.